Police searching for a missing Connecticut woman are focusing now their investigation on her estranged husband and his girlfriend. We're talking about 50-year-old Jennifer Dulos, who disappeared 2 weeks ago.
According to the Hartford Current, the girlfriend of Dulos' estranged husband met with the investigators Friday, and they walked the wooded area behind the home that she shared with her boyfriend.
On the morning of May 24, 2019, a man climbed out of a black pickup truck on a quiet residential street in Hartford, Connecticut, and dropped a heavy trash bag into a public garbage can. Over the next hour, he would do this more than 30 times at locations scattered across the city: driveways, curbside bins, dumpsters behind apartment buildings. Doorbell cameras caught him walking up to strangers' homes in broad daylight and leaving without ringing a single bell. At the time, none of it meant anything to anyone watching. But within days, investigators would determine that inside those bags were paper towels, sponges, and clothing soaked in the blood of a woman who had vanished that very morning, a mother of 5 from the wealthy town of New Canaan, just an hour away, who had dropped her children at school and never come home. Her name was Jennifer Dulos, and the man in the truck was her estranged husband. To understand what happened to Jennifer, you have to go back further than that morning, back to a marriage that from the outside looked like exactly the kind of life people dream about. Jennifer's father grew up in a wealthy Manhattan family, the daughter of a prominent television executive. She was bright, warm, and creative. She went on to write children's books, and friends would later describe her as the kind of mother who threw herself completely into her children's lives. In the early 2000s, she married Fotis Dulos, a Greek-born real estate developer who had built a company called the Four Group, developing high-end homes across Connecticut. By most outward appearances, they were a golden couple, 5 children, a beautiful home, a life that looked, on paper, enviable. But underneath that life, according to court filings Jennifer would later submit, things were not what they appeared to be. She described a marriage marked with control, financial control, emotional control, a husband who she said monitored her movements and isolated her friends. Fotis denied these characterizations. What is not in dispute is that by the mid-2010s, the marriage was collapsing on 2 fronts at once. Personally, the relationship had deteriorated, and financially, Fotis's real estate empire, built largely on borrowed money during the housing boom, was falling apart. The Four Group filed for bankruptcy. Lawsuits piled up. The man who had built a name for himself constructing multi-million-dollar homes was now, by his own admission in court documents, deeply in debt. In June of 2017, Jennifer filed for divorce. What followed was not an ordinary divorce. It became one of the most bitter, drawn-out custody battles Connecticut courts had seen in years. And this is where the case begins to take the shape it would eventually become known for. Jennifer alleged that Fotis had been abusive throughout the marriage and that their children were afraid of him. Fotis, in turn, accused Jennifer of trying to turn the children against him, what's sometimes called parental alienation, and fought aggressively for primary custody. A guardian ad litem was appointed to represent the children's interests. Supervised visitation was ordered for Fotis at certain points. Court filings stretched into the hundreds of pages. Both sides accused the other of manipulation, of lying, of using the children as leverage. By 2019, the case had been in litigation for nearly 2 years, with a final custody trial scheduled for that summer. And there was another person now at the center of Fotis's life, a woman named Michelle Troconis. An event planner originally from Argentina, Troconis had become Fotis's girlfriend during the separation and had moved into the Avon, Connecticut home he was renting after the marital home was sold off as part of the financial collapse. To the outside world, she was simply the new partner of a man going through a difficult divorce. But as investigators would later piece together, her role in what happened next would become one of the central questions of the entire case. May 24, 2019 started as an ordinary Friday. Jennifer dropped her children off at the New Canaan Country School that morning, just as she always did. Witnesses placed her there around 8 a.m. Under the terms of the couple's separation agreement, the children were scheduled to be picked up from school that afternoon and brought to Fotis's home for a custody exchange, a routine that, however painful, had become part of the children's weekly rhythm. Jennifer never picked up the children, she never came home, and she was never seen alive again. When Jennifer failed to arrive, her nanny grew concerned and eventually contacted police. Officers went to her rented home on Wells Lane in New Canaan, and what they found there would set the entire investigation in motion. Inside the garage, investigators discovered what they described as a significant amount of blood. Drops and smears were found on the floor and walls, consistent, according to forensic analysts, with someone who had suffered a serious, potentially fatal loss of blood. There were also signs that someone had attempted to clean the scene. Paper towels and cleaning materials, heavily stained, were recovered from a trash can at the property. Not far away, Jennifer's Chrysler Pacifica minivan was found abandoned near Waveney Park, a large public park in New Canaan, left in a location that made no obvious sense for someone simply running errands. Blood was found inside the vehicle as well. Within hours, the case had transformed from a missing person report into something far more serious, and almost immediately, investigators turned their attention to Fotis. Here is where the surveillance footage becomes critical to the story, and where the documentary's central, haunting image comes from. Police pulled traffic and security camera footage from the hours after Jennifer was last seen, and what they found was Fotis Dulos's black pickup truck driving a long, winding route through Hartford, stopping again and again at residential trash cans, dumpsters, and curbside bins. At each stop, a man matching Fotis's description got out and deposited a bag. Michelle Troconis was seen in the truck with him on portions of that route, and at certain stops, she was seen getting out and helping. Investigators spent days retrieving those bags from the locations captured on camera, sorting through dozens of pieces of trash collected from across the city. Inside them, they found items stained with blood that would later be matched to Jennifer through DNA testing, clothing, gloves, and the kind of cleaning materials consistent with what had been used at the Wells Lane property. Within a week of Jennifer's disappearance, both Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis were arrested, initially on charges of evidence tampering and hindering prosecution. But as the investigation deepened over the following months, it expanded outward to include other people in Fotis's orbit. His father, Stavros Dulos, was charged with hindering prosecution after investigators alleged he had helped dispose of additional evidence, and a man named Kent Morwini, a Connecticut attorney who had represented Fotis during parts of the divorce and who was, by most accounts, one of his closest friends, was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Investigators alleged that conversations between Morwini and Fotis, going back months before Jennifer disappeared, suggested that the idea of harming her had been discussed long before that morning in May. For months, the case moved through pre-trial hearings, evidence disputes, and competing legal strategies, all while Jennifer's body remained missing. Search teams combed wooded areas, reservoirs, and properties connected to Fotis without success. The not knowing became, for many following the case, almost as difficult to process as the crime itself. Jennifer's 5 children were left without their mother in the custody of relatives, while the man accused of killing her continued for a time to maintain his innocence publicly. Then, in January of 2020, just as prosecutors formally upgraded the charges against Fotis Dulos to murder and conspiracy to commit murder, everything changed again. Fotis was found unresponsive inside the garage of his Farmington, Connecticut home, with a hose connected to the exhaust of his running vehicle. He was rushed to a hospital and died days later. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. He had never stood trial. He had never been required to answer under oath for what investigators believed he had done. His death left an enormous unresolved space at the center of the case, and it shifted the legal focus entirely onto the people investigators believed had helped him. Michelle Troconis went to trial in early 2024, nearly 5 years after Jennifer disappeared. Prosecutors laid out in extensive detail the surveillance footage from that day, the truck, the trash bags, her presence beside Fotis at multiple stops. They argued that she had not only helped dispose of evidence, but had been aware of and complicit in a plan that led to Jennifer's death. Her defense argued that she had been manipulated by Fotis, unaware of what was really happening, a woman caught in the orbit of a man capable of far more than she understood. The jury did not accept that explanation. In March of 2024, Michelle Troconis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, along with charges of tampering with evidence and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence. She was later sentenced to more than 14 years in prison. To this day, Jennifer Dulos' body has never been found. Despite extensive searches across multiple states, despite the cooperation of forensic experts and cadaver dogs, despite years of effort, there has been no recovery. For Jennifer's family and for the 5 children she left behind, that absence remains the one piece of the case that no verdict, no sentence, and no surveillance footage has ever been able to resolve. What makes this case continue to resonate years later isn't simply the wealth, or the surveillance footage, or the courtroom drama that followed. It's the fact that everything that happened to Jennifer Dulos unfolded inside the most ordinary structures of a difficult divorce: custody exchanges, school drop-offs, separation agreements, the same systems that millions of families navigate every year without incident. Investigators, advocates, and family court reform groups have since pointed to this case as a stark example of how warning signs raised during high-conflict divorces are sometimes not weighed heavily enough by the systems meant to protect the people inside them. Jennifer Dulos dropped her children off at school on a Friday morning in May, the same way she had hundreds of times before. And somewhere between that ordinary morning and the afternoon custody exchange that never happened, her life ended in a home, in a garage, in the kind of quiet suburban space where nothing is supposed to go wrong. The case was, in the end, solved, but for the people who loved her, it was never finished.